Hello guys, and this is Scott here, and today we're doing the first Christmas 2016 historic video, and in this one, in case you couldn't tell, we're going a very long way back, and we're having a look at the very bitter month that was February 1895. Now, this isn't a month that's often talked about a lot, partly due to the fact that it's a long time ago, but I thought it would just be an interesting one to have a look at since we're now at Christmas. And what better way at Christmas really than to have a look at a very cold winter month. So just before I get started, I'd just like to say that many of the facts and figures that you hear in this video come from the fantastic resource which is Trevor Harley's personal weather website. Professor Harley has a fantastic resource of information that goes back even to the Dark Ages in some cases, and you know, these videos won't really be possible without it. And also the charts that you see in this video come from the historical archive at wettercentral.d. They have an archive of charts going back to January of 1871. So as I always say, if you want to request a historic video, it can be of anything starting in January 1871. So let's pretty much get into 1894-95. And we're going to start off on the 1st of December 1894, so the first day of the winter. And actually it was really quite a mild month actually, there wasn't really much to talk about in it really. So really as we start off on the 1st, you can see we've got an area of high pressure pretty much slap bang on the country. But as we move into the 3rd and into the 6th of December, that pretty much collapses away to the south quite quickly, to be honest. And into the 9th and the 12th of December, we pretty much just set up a very mild southwesterly flow. And this flow pretty much dominates the whole of December. And in fact, as we go through into the 15th, we get some very mild days. In fact, temperatures are quite widely in the south up to, 12, 13 degrees. And as we go into the 18th, actually, there was reports that flowers like daisies and primroses were actually in bloom at this time, so absolutely no sign at all of what was to come. And it stays mild into the 21st and actually into Christmas Eve as well. We have an area of low pressure crossing the country there on Christmas Eve 1894. And as we go into Christmas Day, actually, you can see that just little hints of a colder winter are starting to develop, and because that area of high pressure that's to the south very slowly starts to build up through the country. So Christmas Day itself was actually quite a benign and fairly mildish day, and really that stays the same into Boxing Day as well. And as you can see, actually the high pressure is pretty much over the south of the country there and ridging into the Atlantic. But as we go into the 27th, you can see that area of high pressure is now moved out into the Atlantic. And so this is where, the colours of the winter's starting to show its hand now. It's still fairly mild at this point, but we're just starting to bring down slightly cooler air. As you can see as well, a very cold trough has plunged into Scandinavia. So we're actually starting to set up some colder air to our northeast, and that's going to become important as we move through the winter. And into the 28th, you can see we keep that west to northwesterly flow. But as we go into the 29th, you can see we bring this big area of low pressure to the north, and now this brings some big gales for late December. And in fact, there was 70-80 mile an hour gusts in Scotland. And as you can see, it's actually on a northwesterly breeze. So it's starting to pull down slightly cooler air from Greenland. So, as we go into the 30th, we're starting to get, some overnight frost now, and some cooler air. And as we go into the 31st, you can see there the northerly is set up. So actually this is where the winter starts to show its hand. And you see we've got a big northerly wind actually going all the way up to the north. And actually there was reports of some snow down the east coast. So this, as I said, is where the winter starts to set in. But overall, you can see from the charts really that December was actually quite a mild and unremarkable month. In fact, its central inland temperature was 5.1. So it was another example of one of those winters where the winter doesn't quite get started straight away. You often, there's a lot of winters that do this. December is often, quite an Atlantic dominated month before the cold comes in January and February. And that's exactly what happened in this winter. Because as we go through to the 1st of January 1895, you can see this is where the winter really starts to set up now. So we start off with that northerly flow, and January 1895 was a cold month with a central inland temperature of 0.2 degrees. And it was quite a northerly and northeasterly month, and actually it was quite a sunny month as well, so quite a bit of sunshine to go along with the cold weather. So really quite a classic winter month this. And as you can see really from the charts, it starts off cold straight away. In fact, we have an area of low pressure moving down the east, which brings again some more snow to start off the new year. And as we go into the 2nd and the 3rd of January, we actually bring another area of low pressure from the north, and again this brings some more snow showers to start off the new year. But as we go into the 4th and into the 5th of January, you can see we actually start to build this area of high pressure through the country, but this is building into cold air now. So we start to get some very cold temperatures at the start of January 1895. In fact, early on the 6th of January, we have temperatures down to minus 11 Celsius at Norfolk. So you can see by this time the winter has really started to set in now. It's a complete change on the December that's just gone. And all of a sudden it's a completely different story now. And this winter is actually often regarded as the final winter of the Little Ice Age. And it was really the last cold winter we had until sort of the middle of the second decade of the 1900s. So it was really the last cold winter for quite a few years, and it really set off this warming trend that happened through the 20th century. That's a different story. But as we go into the 7th of January, again you can see we're bringing down another northerly wind there. So again we have northerly gales coming in and some very cold temperatures, and we have snow showers blasting in off the northeast coast there. And it stays the same into the 8th as well. In fact, there was a lot of freezing fog around on the 8th. And in fact, Ross on the Wye actually doesn't get above minus 5 Celsius under fog on this day. As you can see, it's because the isobars have widened there. And we keep, again, cold air in situ into the 9th. And in fact, those are the upper air temperatures there on the 9th. And you can see the minus 5 Celsius isotherm is covering the whole of the country. And we even have minus 10 in some northern and eastern parts. So, that's the whole reason why it's cold. And of course, the longer we keep those cold upper air temperatures across the country, the longer the cold weather and the deeper the cold weather's going to last. And as we go into the 10th now, this is where we start to set up the first major snow event of this winter. As you can see, as we go into the 11th, we have an area of low pressure moving in off the Atlantic, and of course that's bumping into that bitterly cold air that's in place across the country. So on the 12th of January, we get a very widespread snow event. In fact, 10 to 15 centimetres of snow is recorded across the southwest and even up into the Midlands. And in fact, in some places, the snow depths are as deep as 25 centimetres. So a classic snow event, a classic battleground snow event. See, we've got ridge into the east, and the Atlantic trying to break through from the west. So that's a classic setup for a very notable and widespread snow event in this country. And actually, as we go into the 13th, the Atlantic does, for a time, manage to break in. In fact, we carry on with snow through the morning of the 13th. But as we go into the 14th, you can see that that low pressure, it's just starting to bring a southerly wind up now. So temperatures, are starting to push up. And actually into the 15th, we actually have temperatures up to 11 Celsius in the south. So, this is really what let the month down, I suppose. The CET would have definitely been a sub-zero if it wasn't for this milder spell in the middle. But, such is the way it goes. And really, that low pressure actually just stays in place, really. So through the 15th, 16th and into the 17th, it just pretty much stays in place across the country. So at this point, we have more typical mild winter weather. Before, by the 18th, that starts to move away to the east. And again, through the 18th and into the 19th of January, we start to go back onto the colder side of the jet there. You can see we're getting, little hints of high pressure around Greenland. So that's just starting to force the jet stream a bit further south again. So the low pressures are moving to the south, and again we're going onto the cold side of the jet. And in the 20th, again, we actually get another snow event in the south. You can see again that on the northern edge of that area of low pressure, we have cold air in place. And actually, again, throughout central and southern parts of the country, again, we get more further snow in this middle part of January. And then on the 21st of January, there was actually a very interesting weather event. In fact, a cold front actually came down from the north. As you can see, we've got a northerly wind starting to move into Scotland. And this was a very active one. In fact, it produced some very big thunderstorms and some large hail and gales. In fact, because it's bumping into colder air, this was mostly thunder snow. And there was actually some frequent lightning recorded in this. So, that's something you'd expect a cold front to do, after a hot spell in the summer. But this happened in the middle of January, so, frequent lightning, thunderstorms, and gales, so really a pretty classic spell of severe winter weather there on the 21st of January. And again, it stays the same into the 22nd as well. And on the 23rd, there was actually further thunder snow. We're bringing a polar northwesterly across the country there. So again, we have some big showers forming off the Irish Sea, and that's blowing these thundery showers in across the country. So a classic winter wonderland day there. Some big cumulonimbus clouds, bright blue skies, and then the next minute, just heavy snow showers passing through with even cracks of thunder and lightning again. And really, it stays cold really throughout the rest of January. So through the 24th, 25th, and into the 26th, you can see there a very long fetch northerly. We keep some bitterly cold temperatures across the country. Temperatures are well below freezing at this point. Overnight they're definitely well below freezing, and during the daytime, highs of -1 or 0 degrees. So any snow that falls in this late part of January, it isn't melting and it's just hanging around, and with the country's just becoming colder and colder. And actually on the 27th, you can see we bring this area of low pressure in. So again, this brings more snow in across the country to finish off January 1895. And as we go into the 28th and the 29th of January, you can see this area of high pressure starts to build through the country now. And as we go into the 30th, it starts to set up a big Scandinavian high. And so this is going to put us in the pattern for that bitterly cold February that's about to unfold. Of course, that's the chart for the last day of January 1895. A classic winter pattern. The Scandinavian high up to 1,050 millibars. Areas of low pressure well to the south. The North Atlantic Oscillation is through the floor at this point. It's well and truly negative. And actually, if you follow those isobars back across the country, you can see the air is originating from central parts of Russia and Siberia. So you know, it's no surprise why it's phenomenally cold at this stage. And that takes us into, of course, February 1895. And February 1895 is a true classic of a winter month, and it has a central England temperature of minus 1.8 degrees, which makes it the second coldest February on record. And actually at the time this was set, and it was actually the coldest February on record. It was only February of 1947 that was colder than this, but that was only a tenth of a degree colder. So in terms of UK-wide events, this really is about as cold as February weather gets, and there was some phenomenally low temperatures to come. But because it was quite an anticyclonic month, it was actually quite a dry month, and in fact it's the 6th driest February on record. So there wasn't, you know, tons of snow around in this month. You know, there was some, but still, you know, a pretty memorable and phenomenal winter month. And as you can see, we start off on the 1st of February there, and you know, it's just phenomenally cold with easterly winds blasting in across the country, and that goes through into the 2nd and the 3rd of February, so there's absolutely no change. As I said, the North Atlantic Oscillation is through the floor, you know, low pressure around the Azores, and a high pressure system around Greenland and Iceland and into Scandinavia. So, you know, just a locked in cold pattern at this stage. And there's no change into the 4th and the 5th. You know, we keep those easterly winds. And there was a lot of frost, you know, there was a lot of fog around again at this point. And what you've got to remember is, this time, this was before the Clean Air Act. So not only was it phenomenally cold, but, you know, there was just dreadful quality air. So, you know, temperatures were in minus double figures, and the air pollution was just absolutely horrendous. You know, so there was actually really a lot of people that died in this month. You know, it was actually reported that by the end of this February 1895, there was over 1,000 people a week dying, either because of hypothermia or, you know, pneumonia and other respiratory conditions because of, you know, just this absolutely terrible air pollution. But really, you know, it just stays bitterly cold through the 5th, 6th and into the 7th. As you can see, we bring a bit of a snow event through on the 7th into northern areas. And actually, one of the most remarkable features about this month was about to happen, because every day between the 7th and the 19th of February 1895, you know, every night, minus 20 Celsius was recorded or bettered in the UK, you know. So for 12 consecutive nights, the temperature fell to or below minus 20 Celsius. So that's just an absolutely unprecedented statistic for this country. You know, and in fact, Braemar actually bagged 9 of these. So for 9 nights, 7 or 9 nights, Braemar fell below minus 20 Celsius. So some absolutely phenomenal, deep cold that was setting in at this stage. And you can see we've got those blue colours over the country, so it's absolutely so that's a deep cold pool coming through. And again, the northern blocking is just well in force, so it's just keeping this month locked in, freezing. And really, those are the upper air temperatures there on the 7th, and you can see some really bitter air coming in from the east. In fact, the minus 15 Celsius isotherm is across a large part of the country. And really, when you're talking about the minus 15 Celsius, you know, you're really talking about really severe, prolonged and truly deep cold. You know, this is really when you start thinking about record-breaking cold. And of course, the longer that sits over the country, the lower the temperatures at the surface are going to turn. And that stays in through the 8th and into the 9th. And in fact, on the 9th of February, the Isle of Man actually records its lowest ever temperature of -12 celsius. And really, when you consider the fact that the Isle of Man is in the middle of quite a warm sea, you know, it's really just really emphasises this month. And as we go through the 10th of February, again we get this area of low pressure moving up from the southwest. So overnight 10th and into the 11th of February, we actually get two major weather events on this day. In the south we have heavy snow, again bringing, you know, another 10 or 15 centimetres. But in the north, under, you know, those calmer winds, we actually record the lowest temperature ever recorded in this country of -27.2 Celsius. And again, that happened in Braemar. And what's actually rather interesting about these cold records is all three of the winter months actually have -27.2 Celsius as their record low. And this was the time we did it, and it was set in February, on the morning of the 11th of February 1895. So again, you know, just some truly fierce cold, and again heavy snow in the south. So it's really just, you know, setting a benchmark for winter weather in this country, this. And there's no change really as we go through the 12th and into the 13th. In fact, we build this area of high pressure through the country then. So that turns, you know, it a lot drier, but again, you know, some just freezing cold temperatures. And actually in those light winds there was actually quite a lot of smog around in this. So, you know, again, some very poor quality air. Through the 14th and again into the 15th and the 16th, you know, that area of high pressure just stays anchored around the country, and again temperatures of below -20 Celsius are being recorded in Scotland and across quite a wide portion of the country. You know, the rivers are starting to freeze and lakes are starting to freeze. Into the 17th and the 18th and the 19th of February, again there's just absolutely no change. And into the 20th and the 21st, you can see then that high pressure actually starts to ridge out into the Atlantic. So what this starts to do now is bring some slightly milder air into the south. So into the 22nd, you know, it's just enough now to allow maybe daytime temperatures to climb above freezing. But, you know, so there's just a slight thaw into the snow. But of course overnight and in the north it's just still well below freezing. In fact, again in the north it's, you know, temperatures still aren't getting above the freezing level, so it's just ice day after ice day in the north. But as I said, in the south, you know, there is just a slight thaw starting to occur now. And as we go through the 23rd and into the 24th and the 25th of February, again, you know, that sort of just stays how it is. So the weather stays calm and it's colder in the north and slightly milder in the south. And actually as we finish off February, so through the 26th, 27th and into the 28th of February, it was actually reported that on this day, the River Mersey, which runs through northwest England, actually completely frozen at this stage. So again, just another truly remarkable event, you know, to finish off this winter. And actually it wasn't quite done yet, because as we go into the start of March, we did actually get another little cold plunge in March. So through the 1st and the 2nd and into the 3rd of March 1895, again we get another cold plunge, bringing some very cold temperatures across the country. But this was actually quite short-lived though, because as we go through the 4th and into the 5th of March, you can see that area of high pressure then starts to collapse through the country. So as we go through the 6th and into the 7th, you know, we bring some milder air finally through the country. And that's where we're going to finish off on the 8th. So, you know, the winter finally came to an end in the 2nd week of March. But, you know, what a truly phenomenal February. And in fact, I've actually got some pictures of this February, remarkably. This is the scene on the River Thames. You can see, you know, the River Thames was almost completely frozen as well. You know, just deep ice fields, and, you know, the ships are just completely stuck in that. You know, there's the whole country pretty much ground to a halt in this month. We have a second picture. This was actually from the Scottish Highlands, the Highland Railway. As you can see, a lot of workmen are trying to dig this train free. You know, the train's got stuck in some phenomenally deep snow. Means that must be, 5 or 6 feet, even 7 feet deep there. So, just a true sight you don't see very often in this country. And again, another photo. This is again on the River Thames, and you can see this was on the 11th of February, the day the really cold temperatures were set, the record low. And again, the rivers are just completely well and truly frozen. So there's absolutely no surprise why it was such a phenomenally cold month. But yeah, that's mostly going to do it for this video. I'm sorry if this video seemed a bit rushed. There's not really much data for these months that are so far back. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you are a fan of cold weather in this country, I hope it got you inspired, I suppose. And stay tuned for tomorrow, which is Christmas Eve, of course, if you're watching this on the day I've uploaded this, where we'll be having a look at the winter of 62-63, so the grandfather to all of the winters. So thanks for watching this video, guys, and I hope to see you tomorrow.